As yet another Mario Tennis is volleying towards us, I am seeing a number of common queries. Does this mean that Mario Baseball is striking out for good? Is the return of tennis so soon a sign that Mario sports are stuck in a rut? Is Europe the reason that some sports return endlessly while others are given the boot? And what are the odds on these sports that will shape Mario's Switch 2 career? There is an awful lot to unpack here, so let's start by looking at the situation specifically with Mario Tennis to start with. After all, Switch already has 2018's perfectly serviceable Mario Tennis Aces playable on the Switch 2 system, but it doesn't have a Mario Baseball or Mario Basketball, let alone any unusual or new tennis ventures. Granted, a Mario Tennis is kind of a rite of passage for Nintendo consoles for a long time, but there is some kind of precedent of sequel consoles not playing doubles with tennis entries. Specifically, Mario Power Tennis released towards the end of the GameCube era, and the franchise did not return on a home console, except in the new Play Control version, for 11 years, not until 2015's dubious Wii U serve, Mario Tennis Ultra Smash. The DS also skipped an entry even though Game Boy Advance and 3DS had plenty of Mario Tennis content to recommend themselves. Even more curiously, they released the new Play Control version of the GameCube title as the Wii game, a pattern that, if Nintendo followed it in this era, would seem to suggest a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Aces could have been considered over a brand new Mario Tennis title. However, while the new Play Control game scooped over 1.79 million in sales, that is still below the 2.5 million of the Wii's Mario Baseball entry, and given tennis's enduring popularity, it suggests that they probably left a million or two sales on the table through that move. And I suspect it's for that reason that Tennis Fever is releasing nearly 8 years after Tennis Aces, and certainly appears to be substantially expanded over the previous version. It will definitely appeal to new casual players and stands a good chance of being a generation-long evergreen. Mario Tennis Aces also notably had a very strong set of sales indeed, passing 4.5 million copies sold in late 2022, which is 1.5 million up on the 3.06 million from December 2019, 3 years prior. This suggests that the game had consistently sold around 500,000 a year long after the title's original release. It had a number of sales, so not all of these would have been full-price copies, but the Mario movie probably only inflated the game's numbers, and it seems quite plausible to me that by the end of 2025, the game would have had 6 million in sales under its belt. Even if FIFA does substantially worse than its predecessor, and personally I do wonder how many of the Aces install base will double dip, having a Switch 2 Tennis makes sense under these circumstances. Of course, they could just redo Aces for Switch 2 with a Nintendo Switch 2 edition and not cannibalize that game's audience, but they probably bet that at least 2 million people will return, justifying the initial outlay, especially when you consider that FIFA could be continuing to be sold long into the future. As for other sports, Mario had 3 further Switch outings. 2019's Mario and Sonic at the 2020 Olympic Games, which has the odd privilege of being a game for an event that didn't ultimately take place, or not in 2020 anyway, as well as Mario Golf Super Rush and Mario Strikers Battle League. Absent since the Wii is any bespoke baseball game. Absent since the DS is any kind of basketball title, although baseball, as well as the new Mario Sport of Horse Racing, appeared in Mario Sports Superstars, and a previous collection also included basketball. Actually, the Switch had shown a lot more willingness to indulge a more niche set of game-specific sports, with Super Rush being only the second Mario Golf since 2004, and Mario Strikers being the first title in that series since the Wii. Nevertheless, baseball especially is conspicuous by its absence, so to a sports compilation game that might bring in more niche endeavors, so to any kind of innovation in the sports space with Mario. I mean, Nintendo owns a Canadian developer, and yet there's no sign of an ice hockey Mario emerging yet. I think there are 2 factors we need to consider here. Firstly, is there a business case for each kind of Mario sport? Secondly, what are the barriers to putting a title into production? Now, Kit and Krista have recently observed that Nintendo may not want to risk putting out a baseball title that would bomb in Europe, as they want to protect the Mario brand from being tarnished with anything that could be low selling. A fuller discussion is on their Patreon, which I would recommend checking out, but obviously Kit and Krista worked for a long time at Nintendo of America and may have a good inside track to the Nintendo thought process. All that said, I think I'd have a different take on this. Nintendo has used Mario as a launchpad for different experimental franchises before. They stuck Mario's face on Picross at Miyamoto's suggestion because they thought it would increase sales. In the case of Mario Baseball, the risk is actually far lower to Nintendo than anything like that. I don't think even the scandal-hunting games media are likely to be too surprised if a baseball game does tepid numbers in a region that isn't interested in baseball in the first place. But the sport is big in both Japan and America, which represent the majority of the Nintendo territories. Nintendo can simply have a smaller print run in Europe. I suspect it would be the truly gifted journalist who could turn something like this into some major shade on Nintendo that sticks around for longer than perhaps just the one media cycle. However, it's certainly true that if the game only appeals to 2/3 of their usual audience, that is going to put a ceiling on the title's sales potential. On GameCube, baseball was an experiment. On Wii, it was a natural fit for the novelty of motion controls. There's no such novelty case to be made with Switch or Switch 2. Despite this, Mario Strikers returned despite football being popular in Japan and Europe, but not, or not to anywhere near the same degree, in the USA. In terms of how Nintendo's markets map onto sport popularity, baseball would seem a far better bet than football, and it's also clear to see why they haven't rushed to do more with ice hockey. Beloved of 40 million Canadians, sure, but still kind of niche in many other places. Or indeed cricket, which may be the world's second biggest sport by some estimates, but this is largely off the back of markets where Nintendo aren't major presences, such as India and Pakistan. In terms of sales, we can see that both Mario Golf Super Rush and Mario Strikers Battle League reached 2.5 million in their first 10 months on sale on the Switch, suggesting that both are quite reliable niche sellers. It strikes me that baseball would easily be able to clear the 2 million mark, bearing in mind that it did the same on the Wii, and if anything, the Mario brand, including the Mario Sports brands, have only grown since then. Basketball may even be able to do the same as well. And other sports compilations may well be possible, although I doubt that Nintendo will want to do anything that crosses into racing to avoid competing with Mario Kart. Boxing may be too aggressive, and there are a number of other sports that may feel too similar to existing offerings. I could see another field game besides Strikers, but would the gameplay mechanics be sufficiently different to make hockey, ice hockey, or even rugby, or American football perhaps, work? Obviously, these games are different, but given that Strikers borrows liberally from other sports and its own arcade sensibilities anyway, it might be tricky to create a sufficiently distinctive play experience to appeal to Nintendo's internal sensibilities, let alone to the public at large. I assume basketball probably has the best chance under these circumstances, but the same broad caveats may apply. While there are hundreds of potential sports, I suspect for various reasons most would not appeal to Nintendo. Currently, with Mario Tennis as their racket game, Mario Baseball as a bat and ball game, Mario Strikers as a field ball game, Mario Kart as their racing title, and Mario Golf as, well, golf, they covered most major types of popular sporting endeavours. Some other franchises have shown some interest in staking out other sports as their own particular territories, notably the volleyball mode in ARMS, Metroid's long association with pinball, and the sports-specific franchises like Excitebike, Pilot Wings, and Punch-Out being dedicated to specific sports, while bowling and billiards have been in Switch Sports and Clubhouse games respectively. Nintendo could certainly choose to move Mario into any of these spaces, but it's not clear that the brand would particularly benefit, and in some cases the fit isn't very good. Take fishing. Angling is popular, and I'm sure Nintendo aren't done with fishing games, but with Zelda and Animal Crossing, what is the benefit of Mario fishing? A sports compilation featuring some of these titles feels plausible, especially if they can differentiate them from what's gone before. The 3DS's horse racing mode is hardly likely to invite comparisons with Mario Kart after all. All of this brings us to the second consideration that we mentioned earlier, the barriers for production. We have already seen reasons why some sports may not be considered ideal for their mustachioed mascot. Another major concern is who would actually make the games. Here, one reason for the supremacy of tennis and indeed golf becomes apparent. Camelot Software Planning have been making these games for a quarter century and basically make nothing else these days, so Nintendo can commission this team and know that they will only require a minimum of supervision. Next Level Games has experience with strikers, and as a wholly owned subsidiary of Nintendo, they are very convenient for Nintendo to work with. Beyond this, though, things become a little bit tricky. Even if Sega never regained the Olympics license, Nintendo and Sega could form a new Mario and Sonic partnership, or Nintendo could flat out subcontract Sega to produce a game for them. However, while the Olympics group was fairly stable over time, and that team is still mostly at Sega, they seem to be scattered across many different projects now. The Olympics titles were shepherded by Sega, but now Hiro Hirao, who directed the entire series as well as programming for F-Zero GX, has moved on to Puyo Puyo Tetris and Shinobi Art of Vengeance. Neither project is so massive it precludes a further Nintendo collaboration, but the other lead programmers have gone on to Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis for Windows, and Samba de Amigo, suggesting that they really are looking towards something different. Bringing the team back together isn't impossible, but the indication is that they are moving on. It shouldn't be a surprise either that the original Mario Baseball developers have now completely moved on as well. I must admit, I assumed that there would be more crossover between the Bandai Namco teams developing the GameCube and Wii Sluggers titles and the Bandai Namco team who developed the 3DS Sports Superstars game, which of course included baseball. But a look at the credits suggests that not a single person from the Wii game returned on Bandai Namco's end for the 3DS entry, and even from Nintendo there remain but two baseball stalwarts, the rather perfectly named sound supervisor Taro Bando, who is probably unlikely to be leading the gameplay elements, and one of the producers, Toyokazu Nonaka. Nonaka explained in an interview on the Nintendo site, translated through Google Translate, of the Wii Mario Baseball game, this software was made possible through collaboration with Bandai Namco Games. Bandai Namco Games has a wealth of experience and is professional, so I believe that even those who have played various baseball games in the past will be able to enjoy it as a full-fledged baseball game. Additionally, Now Productions, who we worked with on the production, have been working with us since the previous title and understood our ideas, so we were able to leave it to them with peace of mind. It was a struggle, but I believe that we were able to make a good use of the strengths of each company." End quote. Now, Nonaka's entire career has been producing and often managing a wide variety of titles, and it seems that he was involved in shaping this one, but seemingly only to a limited degree compared to, let's say, the way Kensuke Tanabe or Yoshio Sakamoto clearly get waist deep in the games they develop. The producing group appears to be far more about coordinating external efforts than necessarily micromanaging them, as usually you will see with these kinds of third-party productions quite a number of different producers assigned, suggesting a rolling group. More intriguing is the associate producer on GameCube's original, Yuya Sato, a man who is now quite senior at Nintendo, but possibly not in a position that is likely to help Mario Baseball fans. He is a game designer within the Zelda team, and, as the assistant director on Tears of the Kingdom, is probably unlikely to be returning to a baseball spin-off anytime soon. The senior producers on Sports Superstars are Nintendo's third-party production management team and the regular link person for Camelot, but there is no indication at all that they were really getting into the weeds of moulding a new sports game. I would suggest, therefore, that all this more than anything explains the lack of a Switch baseball entry. There simply is not a single team that Nintendo can conveniently call up, especially since the Sports Superstars team is mostly the same group that worked with Sakurai on Kirby Air Riders and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Perhaps Sakurai's next entry is Mario Baseball as a title, but I wouldn't say that's where the safe money ball is. Look at it from Nintendo's point of view. Yes, baseball is a decent seller. 2.5 million even on the Wii is nothing to be sniffed at. But having to bootstrap a new series requires a lot more work. A trust relationship has to be built with a new group, possibly a completely new partnership. Time and money needs to be spent on developing it. Now, I absolutely think Mario Baseball is worth it to Nintendo. They need Mario to continue to expand, and they've got a great proof of concept with prior games, and they basically know that the games can be produced in a relatively inexpensive manner and sell quite well. Also, I actually suspect that they do have a plan for Mario Baseball. Remember Toyokazu Nanaka? As far as I can tell, Nintendo kind of assigns point people to particular projects, and I suspect Nanaka is the one who they will turn to for more baseball, bearing in mind that the only 3 titles which include baseball in recent years he has been a producer on. Now, does he have a team at the moment that could pull off such a project? I would suggest maybe yes, because as well as project managing Nintendo projects with many more third-party developers, including Western developers like WayForward and Ubisoft, he has also worked with a number of interesting Nintendo first-party groups. Now, I'm not sure any of them are especially good fits, but let's just take a look at a few possibilities. First, Nintendo Software Technology. This internal Nintendo team is based in Redmond in Washington in America, and so if anyone is going to make a baseball game outside Japan, it would surely be the USA, and as the studio expands, this seems like a great stepping stone game from the ports, remasters, and indie assist projects that they have mostly been focused on in the recent decades, and of course the smaller Mario vs. Donkey Kong size endeavors that they've undertaken in recent years. But another Nanaka partner is Nintendo Cube of the Super Mario Party franchise. It would be small wonder why Nanaka wasn't rushing them to boot up baseball when Super Mario Party hit a massive home run on Switch with the more than 20 million selling first 2018 title, and of course Nintendo Cube's history is wall-to-wall party-style games in recent decades, but as they expand, a casual sports title feels conceivable as an assignment for them. Of the other people that he's worked with, I don't see Monolith Soft quite fitting the bill, and while I'd be low-key massively intrigued to see Platinum Games on a Mario sports title, it's not exactly in their usual wheelhouse. Realistically, Nintendo probably needs a new team. This means they either need to accept a pitch or seek out developers, as they did back along when they found Next Level Games. They might be able to use an existing group. Indeed, Next Level Games themselves might be a decent shout. They may even be able to dragoon another Bandai Namco team into working on this game. But it's obvious that Nintendo are quite choosy about how they deploy Mario, and even with games that do not feature Mario, they're perfectly willing to reboot if things aren't going exactly according to plan. Also, when exactly would they have commissioned this Mario baseball title? Not before 2020 when they had golf and strikers on the slate, and during the pandemic I can't imagine it was quite such a priority. It feels completely plausible that since the 2023 movie, they've doubled down on their efforts to find a baseball developer for Mario, but until and unless they do find one, I doubt it is anybody's absolute top priority. And what about basketball? Basketball has twice emerged as the preserve of an even less likely partner, Square Enix. The director of Mario Sports Mix and Mario Hoops 3 on 3 doesn't appear to have recent credits, while the lead planner has been a mainstay on recent Resident Evil games. From Nintendo's end, the most senior producer hasn't had a credit in years, although Toyokazu Nanaka is also credited, suggesting, as I say, that he is probably the person who will be responsible for trying to boot back up more Mario sports titles. So, what is the likely outcome of all of this during the Switch 2 generation? Firstly, does Nintendo want more Mario sports titles? I think clearly yes. Of the sports available, baseball is by far the most obvious. It has a proven track record of sales, and it has a likely audience, at least in Japan and America. I don't think it was a development priority in the past, and while they might have produced it, if there was a logical studio to take it on, I think in the Switch 2 era, they will probably want to focus on finding someone new to boot the franchise back up. I think there is a 50% chance we see Mario Baseball in some form by the end of 2030, and a 30% chance we see one announced by the end of 2027. I think a bespoke game is more likely than a sports compilation at this point, and I think if anything, if it's going to appear, it might well appear earlier before Golf drops. As for Mario Basketball, that's a longer shot, but I'd still put it at 30% by the end of 2029. We will see a new Mario Basketball game or collection. For other sports, the likelihoods are of course lower. I'd say only 10% likely we'll see a new Mario Sports series by the end of 2028. Next Level Games' Mario Spiker's Pitch, where a volleyball meets wrestling game, was spiked, and while I think ice hockey feels like a good shout, to me the standout opportunity for some version of Nintendo ice hockey mechanics is actually in Splatoon, although granted it wouldn't really be ice hockey aesthetically. Okay, that is it for now. Please do let me know what you think. Thank you so much as ever to the Patreon supporters of the channel, and to you for watching and hopefully liking and subscribing, and I look forward to seeing you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.